So I'm going to take this thing apart, and I'm going to see if I can see what's wrong with the upper bearing. Either it's got a bad bearing or the bearing keeper or whatever. I'm not sure yet, but we're going to get into it again. Well, I'm taking this thing apart. This is the bearing here. The bearing is fine. This is the top bearing and this is the lower bearing here. What apparently happened is the keeper, which is that ring you see way down in here, was sticking up, and I had to shove it down in, and then I can press this into it. Whether it'll stay in there in place, I don't know, but as I can detect, there's a very, very, very slight play when I move it. But so slight that I would say that it should be just fine if I can get it to stay in there. Now what I got to do is I put this in, and then I got to press hard on it to get it to go seat in there. Now this thing is like it's like a hose clamp almost, and it looked like it was soldered at the end, but there's no physical way I could do that. It closes up and it'll fit tight in there. On the other end, for the top bearing, it's just a plastic housing, and this bearing here, which is a little bigger around, just fits in there snugly. That bearing is in good shape too. So I got to clean the commutator off with sandpaper. You never use emery cloth because that's conductive, so you use sandpaper on that and then blow it out really good. These magnets are powerful. I had to take out the field. Long screws which keep being attracted to the magnet. But the problem is I didn't look when I undid this to find out if this little hook goes on the inside or the outside of this sleeve. Here, this red mark just tells me that I just have a reference mark on the casing to know that I put it in that proper way. It probably doesn't matter, but I always usually mark my things when I take them apart. Crappy little workbench, you can call it that, in the shed here. But we'll give it a try. So we're going to try to get this thing back together here. I don't know how successful I'll be. It's a wonder I got this in. And see these little clips that are on the end here? These are the two powerful magnets. Now trying to get this screw down into the bottom here because the magnets kept pulling it one way or the other. But these little clips, apparently the big flange goes down on the inside and the little one just hooks on the side there. So I think I've got it. So I just got to snug that up, and then I got to try to drive in the works inside here. So pushed it in. She's nice and snug in there. Of course, the brushes haven't been put back in. That's the last thing I do. And now I just got to get this top on, and this bearing here hopefully will sit in there. Of course, naturally, I have to take this collet off because I just needed that to push down on. So I'll take the collet off so we can get it inside. So we'll see what happens. We'll continue. Looks to me like I got it in there. She's turning nice and no grinding noises. And you can see that if that collet, apparently that metal ring that looks like a hose clamp, holds that bearing into place. So the bearing was actually pretty good. Well, we got the brushes out and I forgot to clean the commutator, so what I'm going to do is take some sandpaper and do it from here before I put the brushes in. Blow it all out good and everything else. I looked it over, there's no shorts in there. It looks really good. So that's what I'll do. As you can see, I got the commutator nice and clean. Would have been better if I'd done it when it was outside the case, but trying to get this thing, its bearing back in there, I had quite a time getting that bearing keeper in there. And there's no guarantee that that keeper won't slide back out again either. But I think what this was used for is somebody probably used it for doing regular routing, and this isn't made for heavy duty use. So it puts a strain on this upper bearing, because what happens is when you're routing, you're going back and forth like this, and it's putting a strain on the bearing side to side. This one wasn't affected because it's in a solid plastic keeper. They should have used a solid plastic keeper here. This thing does not come off. This is all one piece. This whole top that I showed you before when you saw it apart is all one piece. So you're kind of like working down in the well. So I have the manual on it, and it gives a blow-up diagram of all the parts that are in here. But I'm glad I didn't order the bearing, because first of all, I didn't need it. Second of all, the keeper is the part that the keeper may have to be replaced, but if it stays in place where it should be, it may be okay. The real test is when I get it all together and fire it up. That's the real test, folks. You ready? Here we go. It's kind of hard to hold a camera and do this too. Looking at the lights here, and it's not dimming the lights. Apparently what it was doing, the bearing was bad. The bearing keeper was bad, and because of that, it was probably making and breaking contacts with the brushes. It's working, so, and put the top back on, and we'll give it another try. We're ready to try this out now. Now I'm gonna shake this, and the reason is I want to make sure there's no other problem. Sounds good. Now, the reason I was shaking it is it makes sense when the bearing keeper, in this case, was bad. When the bearing keeper was bad, well, this movement of shaking it, which should not cause any problems, nor when it's in good shape, but when it's worn, your bearing being loose will disconnect and connect onto the brushes, and that was like it was turning on, as if you were turning the switch on and off, on and off, on and off, and you're drawing current. So that's why the lights were dimming. Alrighty, let's give it one last test here. We got everything back together here, and you know what? I'm really surprised I was able to get this thing back together again with my bad eyesight. But anyways, here we go. Perfect. Everything's tight in there. No dimming of the lights. I can route until my heart's content. Well, folks, I would call this a success. Now, I don't know how long that keeper is going to stay up in there, because it's pretty tight in there, but there's got to be a reason as to why it came out. And the only thing I can think of is somebody used it for stuff they shouldn't use. This is made for laminating, doing edges of countertops and stuff like that. Or very light router work like lettering and stuff. Speaking of that, when I bought this, I could have bought a lettering set for $1, but I figured, well, the router was no good. Said, well, what do I need the lettering set for? Well, later on in the day, I went back to get the lettering set, and it was gone. So, you know what? Sometimes you gotta go and act on your instincts. Thank you for watching. This turned out to be a really good find.